Jules, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, board, staff, and members of the public. After my statement, the chairman will open this meeting and explain the rules for this electronic meeting. Please keep your microphone on mute when you are not speaking. The technical support team may proactively mute participants if the microphone is picking up background noise. Board members should check to make sure the microphone is not muted before speaking. You may text me at any time, 540-336-3948, before or during the meeting if you need additional support, and an IT tech will call your cell to assist. I now turn the meeting over to the board chairman.
Welcome, everybody. I'm opening the meeting and I'm introducing legal counsel, Jonathan Rack, to read the statement.
Good afternoon. In accordance with the governor's state of emergency declaration and executive orders regarding the COVID-19 pandemic, the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors Continuity Ordinance and the General Assembly 2020 budget amendments, Loudoun Water will meet today in an electronic meeting. In compliance with these special procedures, only action items necessary to continue operations of Loudoun Water and the discharge of its lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities will be discussed during today's meeting. Reports and other meeting information are available on board docs. If you have any questions about what the scope of the discussion can be, don't hesitate to let me know. But I think that in general, your normal role of asking questions and overseeing operations of Loudoun Water continues. So don't be shy about comments. Public notice and meeting access information was provided on the Loudoun Water website, and a recording of the meeting will be made and available in both board docs and the Loudoun Water website after the conclusion of the meeting. I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Jonathan. During presentation, staff will pause for questions and discussion. There will be an opportunity for discussion after each presentation, and we will also monitor and recognize the hand raise feature. For each action item, a roll call voice vote will be taken by the board secretary. Opportunity for public comment was provided within the meeting notice. Any written comments were provided to the board secretary and will be read during the public speaker's agenda item. Jewel, can you please take attendance?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Bonfils? Jim Bonfils? Mr. Byers?
I am here.
Mr. Campbell?
Here.
Mr. Kelly?
Here.
Mr. Moody?
Here.
Ms. Sursakar?
Here.
Mr. Sultan?
Here.
Mr. Allen?
Here.
And Mr. Koblis?
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Everyone is here except Mr. Bonfils.
No, I'm here. I'm here. I didn't
Oh.
hit my mic. I was hitting the wrong one. I hit the camera.
Oh, I'm glad you said something. I'll make that change right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, okay, I was just hearing some background noise. I was checking to see who was on. I needed a motion for the approval of the minutes.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Roll call, Jewel.
Yes, sir. Mr. Bonfils?
Yes.
Mr. Byers?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Sursakar?
Yes.
Mr. Sultan?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
And Mr. Koblis?
Yes.
Thank you. Unanimous.
Okay, so when okay, great. When anybody makes a motion, just in case Jewel can't recognize your voice, maybe just say Marty, or just the voice. But maybe Jewel doesn't need that. But I certainly recognize the voice. It's up to you, Jewel. So we're going on with board member comments. Why don't we start with Bill Byers?
No comments, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bonfils?
No comments today.
Mr. Camp,
No comments from me, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kelly,
Nice to see everybody back. Hope everybody is well. And after 5 years, either vice chair or chair, it's nice to be back in the bleachers. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Moody,
Mr. Chairman, no comments.
Ms. Sursikar,
No comments.
Mr. Sultan,
Just like to congratulate staff on another award, this one for treatment that was mentioned the other day.
Mr. Allen,
No comments, Mr. Chairman.
and my only comment is, I believe I had got everybody. If I didn't, Jewel, let me know. I just hopefully everybody is staying safe and healthy. I think one of the most important things is, my company is obviously deals with air conditioning and ventilation and air movement, et cetera. And the most important thing is to just wear your mask, and whoever you're next to, make sure they're wearing a mask, and try to stay 6 feet apart. It's just clearly the most important thing. And then if you're in a outside environment where people are yelling, it's best to stay about 10 feet away. I think everything else, you got to do your best at washing your hands and wiping things down. But definitely this disease transmits itself through the air when people are talking. They're pretty much sure that it doesn't move through the air conditioning system. There's been some comments, but the body of, which is called ASHRAE, American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning, really feels that it just doesn't quite get through the air conditioning like people think. So there's not that much exposure that way, but just keep those masks on. That's very important. With that, I'll turn it over to Carla, and if you could give your general manager's report. Thanks.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Unfortunately, I have to start my comments today with two pieces of sad news. Earlier this week, we lost a member of our Loudonwater family. Marty Graham was a senior maintenance mechanic at our Trap Rock facility, and he lost his battle with cancer on Tuesday. We also learned that Mr. Arlen Black, a former Loudonwater board member, passed away. He had served on our board for over 17 years, including a term as chair from 1992 to 1996. So the Loudonwater thoughts are certainly with those families. As Mr. Sultan referenced in last week's update, I did mention that VDH awarded Trap Rock with the 2019 Gold Water Treatment Plant Performance Award. I want to make sure I get that right, for the second consecutive year. And that award goes to plants that consistently perform above minimum standards. And so congratulations to our Trap Rock team on that award. Pam Kennel, Mark Peterson, and I attended a virtual meeting of the ICPRB co-op this morning. Not a lot to report from that meeting other than the 2020 water supply study is being finalized, and we'd be happy to share that with you when it's published. Staff is diligently working on the 2021 budget and CIP. We will present the operating budget to our Finance Committee in October, and then the CIP will go to a joint committee in November. Just a few stats to talk about. We resumed sending reminder notices to delinquent account holders back in July, and at that time, we sent over 4,800 notices. Since that time, we've reduced delinquent accounts by 65%. And so that's a real testament to the hard work that our customer care representatives are doing to work with those people that are having trouble during this time. We have 614 payment plans, so that is also indicative of something a bit unusual for us. And so we're doing what we can to help customers get through. And as far as connections go, granted, we're only 10 days into September, but we have about 29 ERCs to this point. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. Jewel, do we have anybody that would like to talk from the public?
No, sir, we have no public speakers today.
Okay. Can I have a motion for the adoption of the agenda?
I'll make a
So moved.
motion.
This is Marty.
Oh, I'll second it, Marty.
And Jewel, if you could have a roll call?
Yes, sir. Mr. Bonfils,
Yes.
Mr. Byers,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Moody,
Yes.
Ms. Sursakar,
Yes.
Mr. Sultan,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mr. Koblis.
Yes.
Unanimous, sir.
Okay, Marty, go ahead and give us a brief briefing on the CIP committee.
The first item that was in the meeting was a BOA award. It's for a basic ordering agreement, which allows Loudon Water to have engineering firms perform services without having to go through lengthy, time-consuming procurements for relatively small projects. 13 proposals were received and reviewed by a 5-member selection committee. Firms were interviewed and 4 firms were selected as the most highly qualified firms. The CIP committee recommended that general manager execute 1-year BOAs with Dewberry Engineers, J2 Engineers, Wallace, Montgomery, and Rummel, Klepper, and Carl. Task orders issued under these contacts will need board approval. The committee forwarded this item to be included in the consent agenda. Second item, community systems ammonia removal evaluation. In 2013, EPA revised their freshwater ammonia criteria to protect vulnerable aquatic species from ammonia toxicity in receiving streams. Small facilities like Loudon Water's surface discharge community systems lack the required treatment processes to meet the stringent ammonia limits. Due to their extensive experience with small to medium-sized wastewater plants, staff selected Black & Veatch to identify requirements, necessary improvements, associated costs, and an implementation schedule to meet the new permit limits. The negotiated cost is $290,000 with a 5% contingency for a total authorized budget of $305,000. The CIP committee forwarded this item to be included in the board consent agenda. The third item was Cortland Pump Station task order amendment. In April 2019, the board authorized a task order to Hazen & Sawyer for a not to exceed budget of $226,000 for construction phase services related to the Cortland Permanent Pump Station project. Construction is about 55% complete. The contractor has provided more submittals and RFCs for Hazen's review than were budgeted. Staff has requested a task order amendment of $76,500 to address the deficit created by the additional submittals. Note should be taken that staff is keeping the original $11,000 contingency intact. Given the additional information to be presented at the September board meeting, the committee recommended moving this item to the board without approval or denial. The last things that went on in the meeting were informational items. There was a good master planning update on the joint land management area master planning, and the quarterly report on capital construction and capital spending monthly report were also presented. That's the total for that meeting.
Thanks, Marty. Terry, Finance. Microphone. Microphone.
Yes. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Surprised you guys couldn't hear me talk. The Finance Committee started with two fairly administrative items, if you will. Both are on today's consent agenda. The first being the approval of the Financial Services Advisory Contract with Davenport. The current agreement that we had with Davenport expired in June of this year, and we've been managing the contract on an interim basis, on a month-to-month basis. Staff recommended that we establish a new agreement under the same terms as negotiated by Montgomery County, Virginia. Now, it's important to note that we have done this for the past several years, basically piggybacking off of somebody else's contract. This agreement would extend our current contract through May 14th, 2021, and there are 3 additional 1-year renewals available. There's no annual fee associated with this agreement, and there are hourly rates that are posted in the finance report. If we did end up issuing debt, there would be an agreed upon transaction rate. Staff may decide to negotiate a longer term contract with Davenport in the future, and the Finance Committee is supportive of that. The second item, which is also on consent, is the approval of the audit service contract. In March, an RFP went out. There were 7 proposals received. The top 3 firms were Yount, Hyde & Barbour, PB Mars, and Cherry Burkett. Yount, Hyde & Barbour ended up being the top firm, and staff negotiated the following contract amounts for the subsequent 5 years, and those are also listed in the report. Staff felt that YHB was the best choice. They felt that we have a long-term relationship with them, and continuing forward, this is the best interest of Loudon Water. There was some questions about having a stale accountant or someone who's been around, but YHB injects fresh faces every year into the audit process, so the Finance Committee felt comfortable with renewing that contract with YHB, and it's on the consent agenda. The third item, which is an action item today, was presented by Amy Bevins, and that is proposed changes to our procurement policy. So the procurement of goods, services, insurance, and construction, along with procedures for the disposal of surplus property, must be in accordance with the Code of Virginia, and more specifically, the Virginia Public Procurement Act. The board in 1983 created their own policies that mirror the VPPA, and through the years, as VPE changes their policies, Loudon Water has then in turn changed our policies. In the summer of this year, there was some changes to the VPPA policy, of which we are incorporating those changes into our policy. A lot of them are ministerial, but one of particular note is increasing the maximum permissible aggregate or sum of all phases in goods, services, and non-transportation related construction from $100,000 to $200,000. In the past, Loudon Water has raised both our non-professional and professional services to match the VPPA cap. But this year, the Finance Committee is recommending splitting the construction services approval to include the $100,000 for professional services and the $200,000 for non-professional service. So, in other words, the Finance Committee is recommending that we stay at the previous $100,000 cap for professional services, but go up to the new $200,000 cap for non-professional services. And you'll learn more about that in the upcoming presentation by Ms. Bevins. After that, we had a 5-year financing plan. Keep in mind, this is just a planning tool that incorporates all of the expenses and revenues for the next 5 years, and in an attempt to figure out whether we need to borrow any money in the future. Right now, that plan has us issuing $20 million of debt in 2023. Keep in mind, during last year's 5-year plan of financing, the plan or the model showed us needing to borrow $50 million in 2021 and $20 million in 2022. And obviously we did not need to do that. So the new plan is just to borrow $20 million in 2023. And that's primarily because of ERCs from data centers. So that will continue to evolve, but right now that's the plan. Then we went into some informational items. We had Mr. Carnes presented the mid-year budget results. Operating revenues are 99% of projected for the so far this year, and operating expenses are 97%, excuse me, of projections. ERCs, which is an important metric, through July we had 1,517 ERCs. We are anticipating 2,900, so we're a tiny bit behind that, but we feel it's been a little bit sluggish because of COVID, and we expect a rebound, and we also expect to hit the 2,900 ERC budgeted. There was also a quarterly investment review. We have 294 million in investments, and the average yield is 1.34%. As a point of reference, last year at the same time, our yield was 2.49%. So there's been a substantial 115 basis point decline, and that's primarily because of COVID and because of the lower interest rate environment because of COVID. So that's hurting us on the investment side, but there's not much we can do about it. And that's it.
Thanks, Terry. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
This is Bill, so moved.
Deshaun,
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Bonfils? Mr. Bonfils?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Byers?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Ms. Sursa Carr?
Yes.
Mr. Sultan?
Yes.
I'm sorry. And Mr. Allen?
Yes.
And Mr. Koblis?
Yes.
Very good. Unanimous, sir. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go into the action agenda. Ms. Bevins, go ahead on the proposed changes to the procurement policy.
Just requesting control here. Great. Thank you. Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the entire board. Good afternoon. My name is Amy Bevins. I'm the Loudon Water Procurement Manager. The purpose of today's item is to seek approval of the proposed changes to the Loudon Water Procurement Policy. The procurement of goods, services, insurance, and construction, along with the procedures for the disposal of surplus property, must be conducted in accordance with the Code of Virginia, Section 2.2 4300. This is the Virginia Public Procurement Act, the VPPA. A link to the VPPA was provided in the write-up for your reference. The board adopted purchasing policies and procedures in 1983 to ensure compliance with the VPPA. The policy has been revised several times over the years to the current policy. Pending board approval, the Loudon Water Procurement Policy, revised to be effective October 1st, 2020, sets forth the policies to be followed by Loudon Water staff in fulfilling procurement responsibilities within their delegated limits. It is my responsibility to monitor the policy and seek board approval for policy changes as legislative or administrative changes take place. I'm sorry, I'm not able to go to the next slide here.
Can you double click on the screen?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Michael, it's not working. Great, thank you. Actually, if you could go back one screen, Michael. Thank you, sir. Legislative changes. So the following legislative changes were made to the Code of Virginia effective July 1st, 2020. The VPPA requires Loudon Water to adopt procedures related to these sections, furthermore requiring us to revise the policy to incorporate these changes. VPPA 2.2 4303 increases the maximum permissible aggregate or sum of all phases for goods, services, and non-transportation related construction that may be procured without requiring competitive sealed bids or competitive negotiation for single or term contracts from $100,000 to $200,000. The procurement policy reflects this change within the procedures section on page 4 and on page 7 of the summary of procurement policies. 2.24310 adds sexual orientation and gender identity to the list of prohibited discrimination classes. 2.24343.1 adds sexual orientation, gender identity to the list of prohibited discrimination classes for permitted contracts with certain religious organizations, purpose and limitations. You will find these changes on page 22 of the procurement policy. And 2.24382 modifies language to allow local public bodies to utilize construction management on projects less than 26 million, provided that a project is complex and the procurement method is approved by the agency's governing board. This change can be found on page 12. Before I proceed, do you have any questions about the legislative changes that took place? Great, thank you. Administrative changes. On page 6 of the current policy, it states that the board will approve all construction contracts for $100,000 or more, and any amendment to a construction contract which would cause a contract to be or exceed $100,000, or which is for an amount greater than 25% of the existing contract price, or $50,000. This policy has been consistent with the VPPA limits for procurements that do not require competitive sealed bids or competitive negotiation. Again, this is for goods, services, and non-transportation related construction. With the legislative increase for formal construction procurements to $200,000, I am recommending a corresponding change to the current policy for approvals, increasing board approval from $100,000 to $200,000 on construction contracts. I do want to mention, this was previously mentioned, that the staff's original recommendation to the Finance Committee was to make a change to both construction and professional services to increase both of those amounts from $100,000 to $200,000. However, after discussion, the committee's recommendation was to keep the professional services, the board approval limit at $100,000 and increase the construction board approval to $200,000. And this is reflected in today's recommended motion. Do you have any questions before I move to the next slide? We do have one correction that needs to be made to the policy. This is related to 2.24303. As presented, this change decreases the maximum permissible aggregate or sum of all phases of a single or term contracts for professional services that may be procured without requiring competitive negotiation from $100,000 to $80,000. There was a change that took place in 2018 in the VPPA that increased the amount for competitive negotiation in the formal limit from $60,000 to $80,000. When we presented this increase to the board in 2018, we had made a change in our policy that changed it to $100,000. So essentially, we need to correct that within our policy to mirror the VPPA, that the informal limit is up to $80,000 and the formal solicitation limit for professional services is $80,000 and up. And then the board would approve $100,000 and over. Any questions about the correction?
It looks like Angeline has her hand up.
Sure. Yes,
Sorry,
ma'am.
I was on mute. Thank you for presenting that. I have a question for you there. So in 2018, I quickly summed that the increase was from 60,000 to 80,000. That's a 20,000 increase, correct?
Correct.
Right. So today you're looking at numbers like 80,000 going to 100,000. That's a change. So that's a just change of 20,000. So what I'm trying to understand is that in terms of the increase, so there's a 20,000 increase.
Yes, ma'am. So
in the competitive negotiation, is that what I'm understanding?
yes. So in 2018, the formal threshold, so anything under $60,000 can be solicited informally, meaning that we could just do an informal RFP. And at that time, the formal limit was 60,000, which would require us to issue a formal request for proposal. In 2018, the VPPA increased that formal threshold from 60,000 to 80,000. And we had other changes that we presented to the board in 2018. And it was, I suppose it was an administrative error in our procurement policy, where we increased the formal threshold to $100,000 mistakenly, and we brought that forward. So I would like to make the change in our policy as a cleanup, as a correction, that for our staff, for the formal solicitation limit for professional services is $80,000 rather than $100,000. Anything up to $100,000, our general manager is authorized to make the award on those contracts. And then anything, so you have that 20,000 gap between the 80 and the 100, but we rarely have anything that's professional services that's been solicited that's even in that amount. So hopefully that answered your question. It's kind of in two places within the policy. One, we're talking about the formal solicitation limit, and then the 100,000 and up is the approval limit for the board.
Yes, no, I get that. What I was trying to understand and set my mind on was the incremental percentage of the total cost increase. So that's where I was a little confused. So I was saying to myself, is that 20,000, 30,000? So while you were presenting, I was doing that, incremental cost calculation to better understand this. So, okay, there's been a correction, and then you're just moving forward and making that correction to 80,000. Got it. Thank you so much.
Ma'am. Sure, thank you. Are there any other questions? Great, thank you so much. As presented, please find the recommended motion for the full board approval.
Mr. Chairman, this is Jonathan. I was thinking as Amy was going through the presentation that in addition to the procurement policy, the board also has a separate resolution that delegates various powers to the general manager. And I would suggest that if you adopt this motion, that you amend it to include changing the delegation resolution consistent with the procurement policy.
Then I have a question on that. So the delegation resolution, this is a question I want to understand. So that delegation resolution, is that a delegated authority that you're asking to be, rectified?
So over the years, the board has adopted and periodically amended a resolution that delegates certain powers to the general manager. And for example, on the award of contracts or the approval of contracts up to, I guess it was 100,000 on professional services and non-professional services. And so in this case, since we're changing the procurement policy to amend that limit of delegated authority from $100,000 to $200,000, I'm suggesting that you just make the coordinate amendment to the delegation resolution to pick up the same language that's included in the procurement policy.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, we're on the same page. I thought it was related to the delegated authority. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Appreciate that.
Right.
So does somebody have to make a friendly amendment, or do we just add it on and vote it together, or is it a separate vote? Jonathan?
Whoever actually makes the motion can include that additional language.
Okay. I'll go ahead and make the motion to include the additional language and to approve the construction part to up to $200,000.
This is Angeline. I'll second that now that I have a complete understanding. Thank you.
Roll call.
Vote. Mr. Byers?
Aye.
Bonfils?
Aye.
Mr. Campbell?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Aye.
Ms. Ursakar?
Yes.
Mr. Sultan,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
and Mr. Koblis.
Yes,
Unanimous, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.
thank you. The next, we're going to talk about task order amendment for Cortland. Brian Stone's going to talk about it. And Angelina, if you can remember to put your hand down, you still have it showing up.
Okay, good afternoon, Chairman and members of the board. I'm here to present a request for an amendment for the construction phase services for the Cortland sewage pump station project.
Are you able to click, Brian?
Yeah, I'm not able to, it's not advancing, Michael. Okay, there we go. This is the agenda for the presentation. This is largely the same agenda that you saw, that some of you saw a couple of weeks ago at the CIP meeting. I did add a few bullets here. The second, third, and fourth bullet are new, and it's based on feedback that I got from the CIP committee. So I'll be talking a little bit about the completed professional services contracts, project status and background, CA services background, CA services spending to date, the variances, cost to complete, and then a comparison with other projects. And then I'll close with a recommendation. A little bit about submittal information for completed projects. Okay. We had a question about the number of submittals that we're seeing on our projects. And so what I wanted to do was start with the projected submittals that we saw on these 6 projects. This is information in the left hand, in the center column there for projected submittals. This is information from our contractor on their initial schedule of submittals. And then I've got the actual number of submittals for the project shown as the quantity final. And then I also show a percentage of the projected. So you can see, for instance, on the Beaver Dam project, the contractor initially projected 658 submittals. The final submittal count was 560. And that's through combining some of the submittals, and that project had a lot of testing results that were submitted to show compliance. Those testing results could have included compaction and concrete testing largely, and it's not so much about equipment and facilities on that project. So for that project, we completed the project for roughly 85% of the number of initial projected submittals. The interim biosolids project, the contractor projected 252 submittals at the start of the project. The final number of submittals was 809. So the percentage there was 321%. So we had a significant increase in the number of submittals there. And those submittals were largely due to testing as well for everything from arc flash to vibration testing of equipment, megger testing, harmonics, calibration tests, performance test results, both field testing and factory testing. We had warranties, asset management information, spare parts, and for the HVAC equipment, of course, we get testing and balancing reports for that. So that's just to give you an idea of how the contractor elected to submit these, many of the shop drawings and submittals separately instead of packaging all of the submittals at the end of the project for those things that are testing related. 600 zone tank, we almost doubled the number of submittals for that project, and I won't read through the rest of these. Cortland, we were pretty close from the beginning for the interim pump station project, just completing that project for 20 submittals more than what was initially anticipated. Are there any questions about this slide? Mr. Sultan?
What do you attribute those big differences to? I mean, it's the biofilters and the interim solid. That's a big difference. What could have been done better?
Well, I mean, I suppose we could require that they provide all testing submittals under one cover, but that would, I just mentioned we had, for instance, at the end of the project, we start out the project with equipment submittals, and once the equipment is approved, then we move to factory test results, and that has to be submitted. And then we go to field testing results, that has to be submitted. We also do harmonics testing, of mechanical equipment. We have harmonics testing, vibration testing, arc flash studies, performance testing. We require the contractors to submit their software, the code for their programmable logic controllers. We have functional tests as well. So, I mean, perhaps we could require some of the testing information to come in all at once, but that's how the contractor elected to submit these. Sometimes it's easier for the
Are you saying one of the differences is the way they're packaging it rather than necessarily the amount of work?
Yes, but the packaging does impact the work itself by submitting it in that fashion. Sometimes it's easier for the contractor because they don't have to put multiple PDFs together into one package. They can submit those individually through the software. So it's just in how they elected to submit those, and we normally don't get involved in dictating how they're to submit it because we want it to be as efficient as possible for them, because our real money, the money we spend in capital construction, really is on construction. The engineering services are really just a fraction of the overall, and I'll cover that in a minute, but it's just really a small fraction of what we spend out of this department. Does that answer your question, Mr. Sultan?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
thanks.
Are there any other questions?
Yes. Hi, this is Keith Moody. We were talking about the different types of submittals. Were there certain submittals that were more prevalent in the overruns than others? Was it the testing or was more the construction drawings? What was driving that?
For that project, it would be more, I mean, for the interim biosolids, because that one is really it looks like an outlier here. It's largely about the mechanical testing. We have very extensive testing requirements for all of our treatment plant projects and pump stations to ensure that it is working and conforms to the requirements of the contract and will provide the long-term service that we need. So that's why we have some very extensive requirements for those projects. So that's for that project, it would be more on the testing.
Okay.
Anything else? Now for concrete and some of the materials, we have testing as well, but that's usually during the course of construction, while we're getting there before we start the actual equipment testing itself.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Sultan, your hand is still up. Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I put it up again. Who estimates the projected submittals? Is that the contractor or the engineer?
That's the contractor. That one of our early requirements in all of our projects is to get a schedule of submittals, what they're projecting over the course of the project. So we get a schedule of submittals, we get a construction schedule showing how they plan to perform the work within the contract time. Those are two really early deliveries for us in terms of from the contract, and that's required within a month of the notice to proceed.
Yeah, that's the way we used to do it. I was just wondering if there was any change. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Brian, give me 1 second. Let me stop this and then I'm gonna start it again.
Okay.
Can you request control? Sorry.
Yeah, I'll do it again. Okay. All right. Let me see. I'm clicking on the screen.
Okay. So just let me know when you need me to advance the slide. Sorry about that.
If you could advance it. There you go. Okay. I've got some information here about our professional services contracts. Of course, I mentioned to you before, as part of, many of you heard this as part of the civil BOA presentation 2 weeks ago. We award our engineering contracts on qualifications, not cost. And our contracts are based on time and material estimates and are not lump sum. So in this case, I wanted to just show you the construction cost. We've got 6 or 8 projects there that total $17.5 million, and just how much our CA services was budgeted for each of those projects and how much we ended up spending on those projects. So in this case, there should be some more there, Michael. Some other, yeah, there you go. Just in this case, we budgeted roughly 9%. It was approved by the board for these projects. And we actually finished spending about 82% of the budget that was given to us And that equates to, Michael, I've got to advance one more. I've got some animations. Yep, 7.2%. So for these projects, we averaged around 7.2% as a final paid amount when you look at the value of the CA services against the total contract amount. So for each one of these projects, and I'll just pull a couple of examples here. The Cortland interim pump station project, we initially budgeted $83,500 for that project. The final expenditure on that project for CA services was just a little under $53,000. The Broad Run methanol facility improvement project, which is the second up from the bottom, we budgeted $98,300. We actually spent that full amount for that project. That was the only project here where we spent the full amount of the project. And I will point out, because this question has come up, for the methanol facility project, the engineer actually spent more money on that project than what we paid them, but there were some engineering errors in that project for which we felt that they were responsible. So we had them write that off. We were not going to come back to the board to get more money for that project because of some errors that they had some of their errors over the course of the design in that project. So, but that is the only one of the projects where we actually spent the full amount. Upper Foley, we're very close there, within $1,000, but the rest of these you can see we're at roughly 82% of the budget when you look at it in aggregate. Are there any questions on this slide? Okay, I'm moving into the status now. The project, the contractor Sargent Corporation's under $3.9 million, and the construction period is 27 months. Mike, you'll have to advance it one more time. We're about 55% through with the contract time on the project. Okay, Michael, if you can advance again. Okay, Ms. Sursikar had a question at the CIP meeting about the original request. That original request was put before the CIP committee in February of 2019. We had actually, there were some discussions beforehand, but that original request was actually withdrawn. It was not presented at the March board meeting, but we revised that request to present it at the March CIP meeting. It was revised from $251,000 down to $215,000. And then the total budget was $226,000. And Michael, if you could click one more time, the $226,000 was the approved amount. And that was at the April board meeting. So we never presented the $251,000 to the full board. And that decision was made around the time of the CIP committee meeting in February. Are there any questions on this slide? Okay. A little bit on the construction phase services, where we are on this project. The total fee was $215,000, which is roughly 5.6% of the construction cost. And that's fine, Mike. There you go. And this is our spending through June for the project. We are certainly over on the submittals and the RFCs, or requests for clarification, on the project. The other activities, progress meetings, closeout activities, and site visits are tracking very close to the budget amount. Mr. Koblis?
Is this the CA just for phase one, or is this all the way through next year?
This is for the completion of the project.
Oh my God. Okay.
Okay, this is a budget variance to show the submittals that were conditioned in the proposal or in the task order. And this is the revised projection based on information from the contractor, which results in a $53,000, $500 request for submittals. And then the RFCs and claims is given below, the request for clarification. And we are estimating 60 RFCs over the course of the project. And that would be an additional $23,000. Okay, so the total proposed amendment is for 76,500, and I've got the spending to date is also shown there. So we've got the initial estimated fee, and then the revised fee is shown in the far right hand side. Michael, I'm not able to advance it.
Mr.
Okay.
Koblis, do you have another question?
Your hand is up, Mr. Koblis. Okay. Okay. So this is a summary request. We're at roughly to revise the budget amount to 291,500, which is 7.5% of the construction value. And this slide shows how this project tracks or compares with other projects that are similar, to give you an idea of where this falls. The general range for these type of contracts is in the 7 to 10% range. Any questions? Okay, so why is an amendment needed? It's really largely about mitigating risk to ensuring the quality work by the contractor and to preserve our indemnification protection. The recommended motion is for $76,500 and keep the $11,000 contingency in place. There's an alternative motion there, number 2, and then there are some others that we can certainly discuss. Are there any questions?
I mean, I have some comments. I
Okay.
was just kind of waiting for you to, are you done with the presentation now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So first of all, did you go back to them and say it's too much money?
No, no, we did not. We looked at the value that they were proposing with the number of estimates, with the number of shop drawings and RFCs that they're estimating. We felt that was a fair value for that work, and it provides a protection, long-term protection that we think we need.
And why do you think it's a fair value?
Well,
I mean, they first started off at 265, reduced it to 215, and now they're up to 295. That's a great deal.
Actually, the $215,000 was really imposed upon them based on the feedback we got from the committee, and so we took on some of the submittals ourselves as best we could, but we need some help to finish this job. So, and why do I think it's a fair value is, well, I'm going to be covering change orders here shortly in my construction report, but we're averaging right at 1% change orders on our projects now. So I think we're getting good value out of our engineering services in terms of the change orders that we're seeing on our projects, and especially those change orders that are the result of engineering errors over the course of the project. So I think we're getting good value both during the design and the engineers are capturing our needs and our desires and our wants in these projects, and we're seeing very low change orders over the course of construction related to engineering errors. So I look at the construction value itself as being a real indicator of the quality of the engineering work we're getting.
Well, I mean, the big thing I'm worried about also is we've still got another year and a half. Are they going to come back for more money?
No, we've got about a year left on this project, and we believe it could be completed in the second quarter next year. So no, we don't anticipate them coming back for more money. No, we think we're in good shape with this.
This whole thing, I just have a bad taste in my mouth from the way because I remember this whole thing in the beginning, and we were so happy that we were able to reduce the price, and now we're paying them twice as much. It's just a bad taste in my mouth. I don't know. Anyway, other people got hands up.
Ms. Sursakar had her hand up first.
Yes.
Yes, I did. Yes, this is Angeline. In your conversation with Mark just now, what I heard, and it gave me a little red flag, and I had to raise my hand. And what I mean by that is, I heard you say that there were some flaws or some mistakes or errors made by engineers. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? That
No,
just did not sound good to me.
no. What I'm saying is we have very, very low rates of engineering errors on our projects. And I'm looking at the change orders that we have on construction projects as an indicator of that. And so our errors are very, very low. Our change orders are only 1%, and I'll cover that later on in my second quarter report. So we do not have a problem with engineering errors at all. In fact, they're very low. So we're very pleased with the work we're getting out of our engineers in the design and over the course of construction as well.
So when Mark was asking you the question and he said, I have a bad taste in my mouth, what I inferred he was saying was that, that the cost of this has gone up. As a director on this board, please explain to me, how did the cost go up again? So I'm on the same page as Mark and other folks.
Well, the cost went up because they are having to perform more work than was conditioned in their proposal, and then conditioned in their task order. So that's why the cost is going up, is because we're seeing more submittals over the course of the project and more RFCs than was conditioned in their task order.
Was this related to COVID, or this is just a contingency or an unexpected uncertainty that we didn't see coming?
This is a time and materials task. This is a time and materials task order, and they conditioned and the task order itself was conditioned to estimate the number of submittals and the number of RFCs. So we've gone over that. So we are requesting additional funds to compensate them for what they've already gone over, and then what they're expected to see over the course of the remainder of the project. And this is not COVID related, not at all.
So last time this meeting happened, I wasn't present. Obviously, one of the board members may have posed this question in the past, that are you going to come back and ask us for more money? And I'm pretty sure one of you folks said no, but then you're coming back and asking for more money, which poses Mark's question again. Are you going to come back and ask for more money? That's a very valid question.
Yes, and the answer is no. We're not planning to come back and ask for more money. The money we're requesting, the $76,500, will take us through the end of the project.
Okay, thank you. I hope so.
Mr. Moody has his hand up.
Yes, I just want to get clarity. You did state we're about a year left on this project. Is that correct?
Yeah, roughly a year, but with where they are now, we think that towards the end of the second quarter, we should be moving into the testing phase to complete the project.
Yeah, because I see in the second option there's that $11,000 contingency fee that was contemplated in terms of help covering the gap. But with a year left, I guess the concern is, from my understanding, that there still could be something that comes up that you want to have the general manager's discretion to release that contingency. Is that why you want to keep it in reserves?
Yes, we just want to keep the $11,000 contingency. If something does come up, it really gives us some flexibility there. We don't foresee anything coming up because of the state of where the contract is now, because once we're out of the ground, we're through with the excavation, and a lot of those unknowns have been addressed. So we don't foresee any other requests coming forward, especially if the contingency it remains intact.
One consideration I see is all or nothing in contingency fee. It could be partial use of the contingency fee, but the overall value of it, it's still minor in comparison to what you're asking for.
Right. Mr. Kobles?
Yeah, I'm just concerned about one thing you said before. On the other projects, you were talking about that the contractor provides a list of submittals. But on this project, you have stated that the engineer provided his list of submittals. So which one is it?
Well, we the engineer prepared an initial estimate of the submittals for the purposes of the task order. But the engineer is not going to know how many submittals we're going to be seeing on the project until we get the initial schedule of submittals from the contractor. And even then, we're seeing that the contractors can go over their initial estimate by quite a lot. So these, the task order was assumed a certain number of submittals. Yes.
So did you get a submittal list from the contractor on this job?
Yes, and that information was included in the, Michael, if I can go up. One more. Go, let me, a couple more there. I think, yeah, the 315 is based on the information from the contractor, right? That's what's circled there at the top.
So so we've known that there was going to be 315 submittals since day one.
No, we don't get that information until after after the notice to proceed is issued. So it comes early in the project, but then it's revised over the course of the project too, because what I showed you earlier, Michael, if I can go back a couple more slides. Keep going. Keep going. Right there. Okay, so in these projects, the contractor initially projected a certain number of submittals, which is given in that second column from the left. And then the third column from the left shows the quantity of the final number of submittals for those projects. So, even the contractor, he doesn't, whether it's in his inability to plan or he executed the work in a different way, doesn't usually submit. He usually submits more submittals than he's projected. And in this case, the only project that was lower was the Beaver Dam project at 560 submittals for that.
Brian, I understand all that. I'm only worried about this project. So what was the original amount of submittals that the contractor said was going to be in their contract?
I would have to ask Eric Smedley that question, and I think he's online, and I don't know if he has that information readily at hand.
Well, then my next question is, if he came up with 250 submittals in the beginning and now he's at 315, then we should be able to go to the contractor and say, hey, you said it was going to be 250, and now I have to pay my engineer to review these additional submittals.
Well, the only means we have to recoup submittal review costs from the contractor is if we go into the second and third resubmittals over the course of the project, which for this project, we can recover $25,000 so far from the contractor. But we don't present the contractor's estimated number of submittals when we're requesting task order approval from the CIP committee. We don't even have that information at that time. So, I mean, in the future, it might be something we can look at, is to wait until we get that information to come forward to the CIP committee. But what we're seeing here is that the contractors typically underestimate the number of submittals over the course of a project.
So what you're basically saying is it's not really 291,000, it's 291,000 plus $25,000.
No, the 25,000 would come out of the 291,000. So that's money we're going to recover back out of the 291,000.
So then it's not really 291,000 then.
Well,
why are we asking for 291 if we're going to get 25,000 back?
I don't have a means of moving money from one pot to another. So we're going to collect out of the $76,500 requested, we're going to collect $25,000 back from the contractor so that the real impact to Loudon Water will be $51,500.
Brian, you buried your lead. If you would have said that in the beginning, I would have been all okay with this. All right. That's a lot better then. But still, it's just asking for more money is at this time just unbelievable. But I think I understand, and maybe we needed, on the next time we do something like this, we need to show this a little different way, that it's not technically 76,500. it's only $50,000 because you're getting $25,000 a different way. So maybe we need to show that in the future a different way. I think that even though this kind of smells a little bit, I think I've got to support it now that I know there's an extra $25,000 sitting out there. One big reason is I know that the RFI section of this is uncontrollable by the engineer. That's something that's, depending on the contractor asking too many questions. So I feel 10 times better now.
Thank you. Mr. Sultan? Mr. Sultan?
Mr. Sultan, you're muted, sir. Could you turn on your microphone?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Isn't it true that, you tell me if I'm wrong, but isn't it true that you get a better project the more submittals you get, that there's more clarifications? Don't you get a better product?
Well, submittals, at their core, submittals are about showing contract compliance and how the contractor is planning to perform the work and comply with the contract documents. And so that's, when we go through equipment submittals, it's to show that he's meeting the specifications. When they're testing and performance requirements, he's showing how he's meeting the specifications. So really, yes, it's to show it does give us better quality work, and it's an indicator versus not getting submittals, and you would never know in some cases of the quality.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the point that, that having a lot of submittals is not necessarily a bad thing.
Right. We have extensive submittal requirements because we have operational requirements and performance requirements that we have to meet. We've got, discharge permits with the state. And so we go through extensive testing and have extensive submittal requirements for our projects. Mr. Kobus?
Yeah, just Marty, were you done? I'm sorry. Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, speaking on the engineering side, more submittals is not good. It's better to bundle submittals for the engineer to review all at one time. When they bounce in and bounce out of a project, I think it's more room for error rather than having a bundled submittal. But anyway,
Point well taken, yes.
Is there anybody else that has anything on this? Well, I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve this now that I know that there's that extra $25,000 in there.
Second, but this is Marty, second.
Roll call, Mr. Byers?
Yes.
Mr. Bonfils?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Ms. Sursakar?
Yes.
Mr. Sultan?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
And Mr. Kobus?
Yes.
Unanimous, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next is approval of the butterfly roof, and Ms. Crosby, go ahead. Hopefully, Michael, that we'll get this thing fixed for the next board meeting.
Yes, we will.
Okay, maybe test it out before we start the board meeting next time.
All right, good afternoon. I believe Dale Hummus is here with us today, and he wanted to give a brief introduction about this project before I started talking through the butterfly roof.
Yes, thank you, Sue, and Mr. Chairman and members. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. My role here is to try to support your discussion, but also introduce what Sue's going to present. And I'll just go back a month or so over the summer break. I've had a lot of conversations with many of you and Nova Parks folks and Also talked with one owner of a butterfly roof down on the campus of the University of Tennessee in Knoxville to learn more about their experience with the roof, because there are three basic areas of focus here, I believe. One is technical in nature with regard to the roof. Another is the value that the roof provides to Loudon Water, and I'll get to that in a moment. And the third is sort of that intangible aesthetic concern that many of us may have one way or the other regarding the roof. But getting to the technical part, I think the major concern that we heard valid questions regarding the maintenance requirements for a roof like this, the structural integrity of the roof to hold up snow load and things of that nature. And so we looked into all of that, and we are assured that this roof design will be not only adequate to support a snow load and things of that nature, but also have the ability for a worker to walk on the roof to perform the maintenance that will be required. And on the maintenance point, we did learn that the difference between maintaining a roof like a butterfly roof that is being designed at Reservoir Park and a standard gable roof with gutters and downspouts is really not a differentiator. It's both have to be maintained. There may be leaves that gather on the gutters. There may be leaves that gather in the valley of this roof. And so you will probably have to use a blower to clear off the roof from time to time, as you would a ladder and a workman to clear out the gutters or the tops of the gutters if they have gutter guards on them. And we're all familiar with that. So we sort of cleared that concern and shared that with Nova Parks folks. With regard to the value of the roof for Loudon Water, I want to go back to, and this will get to Sue's presentation. Some of you are familiar with the master plan that was developed for Beaver Dam Reservoir, not the park, but the entire reservoir. And Loudon Water early on identified the need for Loudon Water to have a presence or an identity or a way to make sure that the public knew that this was drinking water. And so we had identified a peninsula that is just downstream of Reservoir Park on which to build an education center. And that became sort of phase 2 or 3 of the project. And we looked into that a little bit more, and the cost would be one consideration, but also access is another. Because if you look at the topography of how one would move from a parking lot to that peninsula, it's fairly steep. So it could be awkward and difficult for handicapped and others to get to that location. So some of the focus became, how long is that going to happen? How is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? And so we began to focus on having a strong educational program in Reservoir Park. So we tasked our design team with identifying features and locations throughout the park where Sue and her staff could really build an effective education program. And one of those became the water story that would involve not only how water is captured on a site and managed on a site, but how is it managed as it flows down to a drinking water reservoir? How is it best managed? So a lot of the design within the park having to do with rain gardens, stormwater management, and other features of that nature are a part of that overall effort to provide that educational opportunity. The butterfly roof came into play because it offers a fairly interesting, in my opinion, way for a visitor and or a school classroom led by Loudon Water instructors to see how water falls off a roof and is dissipated through structures and released to the reservoir and cleaned on its way down to the reservoir. So that's a big part of the water story, to keep the focus on drinking water. And Sue will talk about some of the other opportunities that are being explored in the park for that same educational purpose. The other is sort of the focus of the visitor's view of the park. And one of the things that you may recall we did during the design is modify the entrance road from the master plan for the park so that a car and its occupants driving into the park would begin to see glimpses of the water by looking under the tree canopy and through some of the trees down to the water. So we're assured that that's going to happen, but then we changed some of the locations of buildings and the entrance into the parking lot so that there would be a clearer view from that location down to the water. And trees will be cleared in that area for the stormwater management facilities that I mentioned earlier, and the visitor will be able to get that view of the water. We then sought to prevent obscuring that view by a gable roof and looked at different alternatives. The butterfly roof has a much smaller profile than a gable roof, so we will be able to see through and under the roof and the other structures in a way that more of the water view will be seen by the visitor, and that is what this park is about. It's about the water. It's not so much about the structures. So that's sort of a tee up of the work that was done by Loudon Water over the last month and a half to bring us to this understanding of what the value of the roof is, what, if any, technical issues we can identify in a roof of this nature. I'll also mention quickly that cost is always a concern. And while I believe by what I've looked into that the roof itself will likely be more expensive than a standard gable roof, when you look at the simplicity of the civil engineering that happens downstream of the roof, there's no guttering, no downspouts, no underground pipes to move water to the stormwater management facilities. The costs are not materially different. And we want this story, I think the story is important to begin as water flows off this roof, not begin at the end of a pipe, which is some distance away from the buildings. So those are my thoughts. I think that understanding the education program is very important, and I'll be glad to take questions, perhaps after Sue makes her presentation. So Sue, with that.
All right, thanks, Dale. There we go. So we're coming forward today to ask for your support and approval of the butterfly roof design. It is the best choice to provide the educational opportunity to begin the water story at Reservoir Park. The unique design invokes conversation so we can tell that story to park visitors. Education about water is critical at Reservoir Park so we can ensure that visitors appreciate that they're enjoying a drinking water reservoir first and foremost. The two major deciding factors for the roof design were for its educational element and for its use of low impact development. The butterfly roof shows water conveyance and collection in an artful and interactive way. The low impact design emphasizes conservation and use of on-site natural features to protect water quality. This speaks to our environmental stewardship principle and should be expected of a water utility. The architectural design of the roof seamlessly integrates the educational experience with the operational requirements of a drinking water reservoir. When you are in the structure, you are part of the reservoir's ecosystem. So this is the conversation starter, the spark that gets visitors pulled into the story that Dale was just talking about. So let's put the butterfly roof into the context of the overall educational strategy for Reservoir Park. As many of you know, our education program is a very important part of our mission at Loudon Water. Since the Aquaria opened its doors in 2008, it's been a destination for Loudoun County students, scouts, civic groups, and interested customers to learn more about drinking water, conservation, wastewater treatment, wetlands, and more. We have over 1,500 visitors to the Aquaria each year, and in 2019, we served over 7,000 students with staff visits to schools, demonstrating our watershed model, providing subject matter experts, and sharing tools, information, and resources to complement classroom instruction. The partnership between LCPS and Loudon Water has become so visible that we are an executive council member of the School Business Partnership, and this position is voted on each year by the school board. Our education program has earned high respect and high regard from our community partners. And on the slide there, you can see just some snippets of some testimonials from teachers, librarians, and others that we've worked with over the years. So with Beaver Dam Reservoir Park, we can elevate our program to the next level. Beaver Dam provides an extremely unique opportunity to present a living lab where visitors can experience in a natural setting some of the themes, concepts, ideas, and other topics covered in the Aquary exhibits. The Reservoir Park program is an extension of what we are doing well already, but with a more engaging, interesting, and immersive environment. The educational planning goal is to focus on how the water story is told through the visitor experience. The butterfly roof is so important to this immersive experience. It's where the story begins. The roof design, selected based on our guiding principles, is the best practical option that gets us to this strategic educational result. Ultimately, the park represents Loudon Water's dedication to the security of clean drinking water and the future health of the community. It's a showcase to our commitment to water resource management that will benefit Loudoun County residents for generations to come. And what I've put on the screen here are just some of our initial ideas for exhibits, tactile experiences, signage, and those types of things that we envision for Beaver Dam Reservoir Park. And with that, I'm happy to take questions about our education program, but also wanted to let the group know that our project team is also here to answer any questions you might have, including Evan Grimm from Nelson Bergwaltz. And I'm having trouble advancing to the next slide there. There we go. This is the recommended motion, but I'm happy to entertain any questions beforehand.
Yeah, I have some comments. This is Brent. Thank you, Sue. And some of my comments aren't just to you, Sue. They're to everyone. But you know, I think it was about 7 months ago that we were shown the renderings for the buildings at the park. I think it was February, and you know, the board did not participate in the decision making that led up to that selection, and we were not asked to approve the design. It was just presented as an informational item. And following that, there was a bunch of discussion, as you all will recall. And at the following meeting, Mr. Bonfils made a motion to approve the concept as presented. And we voted on that as a board. And it failed because a majority of the board wanted to see some alternative renderings that reflected a traditional design before we made a final decision, which by the way, is just best management practice. But from my perspective, you know, here we are, what, 7 months later, we're basically right back to where we started, where we have a contemporary design. It's unique, it's interesting, that's fair. I don't agree with the suggestion that only a contemporary upside down roof can promote an educational experience there. You know, I don't agree with that. You know, Dale said that it's an interesting way to observe water coming off a roof. I think that's a totally fair statement, but I don't think it's the only way. But I'm disappointed that we haven't been given a meaningful alternative to consider. That's where a lot of this discussion's been the past months. So I'll be voting no on this motion, but if we're going to avoid similar delays and problems in the future, I think it's important for the board to be more involved in the process so that we're not having this type of interaction. I think that's I think we're all on the same page there. This needs to be more collaborative. So after this vote's been taken, I'll be making a motion for the board to form an ad hoc committee for the Beaver Dam Park so that we can have hopefully a more collaborative process as we move forward.
Ms. Ursakar has a question. Ms. Ursakar, is your microphone muted?
Yes, I apologize for that. I'm here now. This is Angeline. I just wanted to just continue with my thoughts with where Brent left off. His final remark was disappointed, you know, with the alternative and meaningful consideration was not given to this. I haven't been on the board for too long, but been there for a while enough to understand that I too have some doubts about the butterfly roof. I've spent a lot of my time going back and forth with, you know, with active thoughts and silent thinking. And I just have to say that I will vote for a no today. And the reasoning is it's the cost and you know, and the weathering that's involved as well. In terms of, I know we don't get a lot of snow in Virginia like we did in Minnesota when I was there, but still it's you never know, you know. So you know, with weathering and water and snow damage, that's a concern to me, and the cost as well. It's involved in that too. That is just, there's a lot of cons related to the cost as well. So here on the board, we make decisions about the cost. You know, the last thing we want as board members is to approve more of a cost than we actually need to. And for me, in the long run, I see that we would, you know, we would be spending a lot more on this, on the maintenance of this roof than we may be in the short term. So decisions should always be made in terms of, you know, keeping long-term considerations and implications in mind. And for that reason, and only that reason, I would have to say no on this today. Thank you.
Mr. Koblis has a question.
Yeah, I'm fully supporting the roof. I've worked with Loudon Water now for 11 years, and I feel like they're the experts. I'm not the expert. And so if they feel this is what they need to show what they do and what we do, then I fully support it. My only comment is when Brent said that we made the vote last time, I don't believe we were voting for a different design. If I remember correctly, we were voting to see if there was anything we could add to that one design, which was the stones versus wood, etc. I don't remember that we were voting to create a whole different design. So maybe somebody could go back and find out what the actual design, what we voted on. It's not going to really matter for my decision today.
Mr. Kelly, you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to respond to Mark's comment. He's right. What we talked about last time, when we first saw this, was to see if there's a way to soften the contemporary feel. It wasn't really to go back and get a start over with a whole new design. It was to see if there was a way to add elements to this to kind of soften the look a little bit. I think there was a bit of a period of acceptance just because it was such a different design than what we normally see around North Virginia. But that was my recollection, that it wasn't to get a new design out there. It was to see if we could soften things a little bit. It was an acceptance, I think, of the butterfly roof with some modifications. Thank you.
Mr. Sultan?
I'm going to vote for this, and I think one of the things, I agree with what Mark and Sean said, that I think it was just materials. I don't think it was a whole different design, but again, with my advanced age, my memory could be going, but that's what I think I remember, what they were saying. The other thing too is we're going to look bad to this community if we have ad nauseum delays in getting this thing done. It's unfortunate the pandemic hit and maybe stopped some of the discussions, but I think it's time to move forward with this. And I think we're going to look bad if we continue to discuss this. And the last thing is, I don't think the cost differential between a gable roof and a butterfly roof was significant. I think that's what was just mentioned, that the appurtenances that go with it are going to be cheaper for the butterfly roof. Therefore, the cost differential between the two items is not going to be significant. But anyway, that's my comments, and I will be voting for this.
Mr. Byers?
Thank you. The first thing I wanted to ask is, I don't know who the gentleman with the beard was that's impersonating Dale Hamas, but he gave a great presentation, so I appreciated it. And Sue, I think you gave a great presentation too. I just wanted to mention that the butterfly design, when it comes to water education, is not unusual. I've been to 2 national parks in Utah, Arches and Canyonlands National Park, which are next to each other, which are sort of in a desert, but a desert that gets a lot of snow in the wintertime. And both of those parks utilize butterfly roofs in a number of the park facilities, including the visitor center. And that was the first time I ever saw it. And the park ranger spent 15 minutes explaining to us why the butterfly roof is utilized in water conservation efforts and in water management efforts that are, if you think they're important in Loudoun County, go out to a desert in Utah, and it's even more important. So I really appreciate the information that Dale added today, and I will be voting in favor as well. Thank you.
Mr. Moody has a question.
Yes, it's been some time since we've had a discussion about that, as everyone noted. I wanted to ask, just with the butterfly roof, I wanted to see the water collection area. Could you go back? Is there a rendering or drawing just to show that? I want to get a better understanding. I'm looking at this diagram. There's a water collection in front of the structure here. Is that where it's going to run off in the front? Or is it on the other side? Just trying to understand. I see this collection area here.
Yeah, so it would run off at the direction of the catchment basin there.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just wanted to get a visual because it's been some time. So thank you. That's all.
Mr. Allen has a question.
Yes. I'm gonna vote for the project. I have been straddling the fence back and forth for months on which way to go. I think the educational component is compelling, and I think aesthetically, it's very hard to determine whether or not what percentage of the people are going to like it versus not like it from an aesthetic standpoint. I agree that it's probably not a traditional architectural style for this area, but then again, do we want the park to look exactly like Brambleton, or do we want the park to have an educational component? So I think when you look at the design of a gabled roof versus a butterfly roof, it's very subjective, and I think you're going to have half the people like it and half of the people not like it. So I think we could go back and forth forever on this subject. I am disappointed in the fact that we were not more engaged in this process. This is probably going to be the most public-facing project Loudoun Water probably will ever have. We make a lot of decisions about water treatment and pump stations and what have you, that the public really doesn't see. And this is going to be something that they're really going to see. And I think our necks are out on the line to get it right. So I would have liked to have had a lot more participation and involvement in those choices. But having said that, like Marty said, I think it's time to move on. And I don't think we can continue to delay. And I don't want to spend any more money. We're already close to budget or over budget. And going back and doing designs is just going to add expense. So when you add it all up, it's still a tough choice. But I'm going to support it for the option of moving forward. But as Brett did say, going forward, I would like to see a lot more participation in the softening of this building and the design. Maybe we can do some design modifications. I know there's already been renderings. There's been probably 15 different renderings. But I think some people on the board, whether it's an ad hoc committee or it's the Water Resource Committee, which maybe could get involved in this, there has to be more transparency and there has to be board involvement, and it has to be going forward, it has to be much more collaborative than it's been in the past.
I don't see any more hands up, so I'll make the motion to approve the butterfly roof.
I'll second, Sean.
Mr. Kelly, second. And roll call vote, Mr. Byers,
Yes.
Mr. Bonfils,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
No.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Moody,
Yes.
Ms. Sursakar,
No.
Mr. Sultan,
Yeah, yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
and Mr. Koblis.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'll go ahead and make the motion for the ad hoc committee.
Can you, Jonathan, is this the right time to do this?
It's not technically on the agenda, but if the other members of the board have no objection, I think it could be in order.
Oh, no, I just meant, is the timing correct, or do we wait till new business? I guess this is new business. So,
yeah, actually, you're right.
Okay.
Coincidentally.
So Brent has made the motion. Does anybody want to second it?
I'm not clear. What is the motion exactly? This is Marty.
Marty, the motion is to form an ad hoc committee of the board for the park.
It's Sean, I've raised my hand. I have a question. It's really for Jonathan and for Mark. Isn't it up to the chairman to create committees? Does the board need to vote on a new committee?
So the bylaws include the ability of the chairman to form ad hoc committees and appoint the membership. But that is not an exclusive power that's reserved to the chairman, so that if the board wished to vote to create a new committee, that would be a motion that could be adopted. It's more that the bylaws gives the ability for the chairman to do so without action of the board itself.
Was there a second?
I had Mr. Allen a second.
Okay. So now would be the time for discussion. I guess, I mean, I'm all for the committee, but I think it seems like the people that are most concerned about this are already on a committee, the Water Resources Committee, and it can be easily folded into that committee rather than creating a separate committee. It's just a suggestion on my part. I'm not fully, either way, it doesn't matter to me. But it just seems like it's easier since we already have the Water Resource Committee, that we can have Loudoun Water commit that a portion of the meeting will always be about the design for the Beaver Dam Park. Just a suggestion.
Chair, I have a.
And Mark, if you recall, sorry, Sean, if you recall, we had discussed that at one point early on, that when we formed this committee, that it could be part of their responsibilities was to do that. So I think that's a good suggestion.
Yeah, I also think it's a good suggestion, and I'd be happy to make a friendly amendment to the maker of the amendment and the second to make the motion to request that the chair friendly request that the chair place this in the purview of that committee and the Water Resources Committee, and then assign it as such. That would be my friendly amendment to your amendment. Your motion, Brent.
Yes, and I'm certainly open to that. The only questions that come to mind is I'm just not aware of what's on the agenda for that committee. The whole purpose of having an ad hoc committee like that is that you're not hogging up, for instance, like a full board meeting. talking about parking spaces or trees or what have you. And so I don't know what's planned for the agenda of that committee. I'm not even sure who's on it or who's running it or any of that, but a little bit more information on that from my perspective would be helpful. But as long as we're not causing a problem or having really long meetings in that, what's it called? The water, what's it called? The water committee?
Brent, you're actually on that committee. You know that, right?
Right.
And you said, I don't, but what's the name of that committee again?
Well, it's been kind of preempted by COVID. We haven't had a meeting. You know, we just put some of the stuff together as we went into to the social distancing, and so this would be one of the first main things on it. But one of the big things for the committee is community outreach, and this education mission is a big part of that committee.
Yep. Well, yeah, if you guys are fine with that, I'm fine with it. I just wouldn't, you know, if there's a lot of other stuff. Are you chair, Jim? Am I remembering that correctly?
That's what I remember from the memo from the chair. So
okay, good. So as long as we're not co-opting the agenda for whatever's been put on that committee, you know, I'm totally cool with that.
Yeah, maybe Carla, why don't you resend? You sent me that thing on that committee charter also, but just to remind everybody who's on that committee, Jim Bonfels is chair, Terry Allen is on it, Brent Campbell is on it, and Marty Sultan is on it. Right. So it's pretty much the key players that need to be on it. And like Jim said, there really isn't that much that was. It's more. Sean set up the committee more for the education and everything having to do with water resources, so it wouldn't have to go through CIP and financial. But Carla, if you could resend that out. But I really think after you read the charter, it'll be clear that this is a great place for it, and I don't think it's going to affect the time needed on the committee right now adversely at all. In fact, I think it'd be good. Looks like Marty has his hand up.
As a member of that committee, I'd love to be involved with that.
Okay, well then, Jim, you're more of a parliament, or I guess I don't know, but what we need to accept this friendly amendment, Jonathan. Is that how this works?
Or you could rescind your motion.
Yeah, so Brent, as the maker of the motion, you can either choose to accept Jim Bonfils' amendment, or you can decide not to and ask for a vote on the establishment of an ad hoc committee. So it's your decision as to whether you'd like to proceed with the motion to create an ad hoc committee.
Thank you. Well, I'll go ahead and accept Jim's friendly amendment.
Do we need a second?
Yes, sir. We do not have a second on the friendly amendment.
Second.
I'm sorry, who was the second?
Mr. Allen.
Thank you.
Roll call.
And well, I believe.
Oh, Angeline has her hand up. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was just listening to everybody. I'm a little confused. Can please somebody fill me in? So with the Water Resource Committee that is chaired by Jim, I'm not on that committee. So we're lapping this ad hoc committee into the Water Resource Committee, right?
I think maybe I can take a stab at restating the motion.
This ad hoc committee into the Water Resource Committee that is chaired by Jim, correct?
Yeah, I don't think that the amendment to the motion was to fold in the ad hoc committee. It would not establish an ad hoc committee, but rather direct the staff to bring the design decisions related to Reservoir Park to the Water Resources Committee for collaboration and involvement of the board. Is that a fair representation of Jim Bonfils of what you were intended?
That is correct.
Okay, well, that being said, I mean, I just want to see where I stand with all this, because originally I'm not on that committee, so are we expected? I mean, we're going to vote yes or no. So are we? I'm trying to see my standing so I can make a informed decision here. I'm really confused. I'm sorry, I am.
So the vision that I would see that there would be some discussions about aspects of the park, design, materials, selections, things like that staff would bring forward for consideration. And like any other committee, you are welcome to be at the committee meetings. In the current environment, that will be virtual, of course. That would be your input, and then of course many of the decisions would then be presented. The recommendations would be forwarded to the full board if needed.
So remind me, why are we forming this ad hoc committee? What is the purpose of that again?
I'll speak up, Angeline. The purpose from my perspective is that there's a lot of details associated with the park, and rather than taking up, a finance committee or a CIP committee or a full board committee with all of the details there, we're setting up a committee, or in this case, using an existing committee where we can roll up our sleeves and get into the details without taking up everybody's time. So, I defer to the chairman and to Mr. Bonfils, the chairman of the committee, but, if other people, including yourself, would like to be on that committee to participate specifically in this scope, I think that'd be great, and I'm sure they wouldn't have an objection to that, but I'll let them speak. Okay,
thank you for that clarification, Brent.
Mr. Chairman, if I could also just offer some historical information. A number of you were on the board when the Trap Rock administration building was being designed, and in that case, there were concerns about the plan that the architect first presented, and there was I believe it was an ad hoc committee in that case that was formed of several board members who engaged directly with the designers, with the staff, and had an opportunity to guide the design of that building. And I'm sensing that this would be sort of a similar role where it would be a sounding board, an opportunity for representatives of the board who are on the committee to continue to guide and influence that design process. It also would make recommendations to the full board when it comes to adopting final designs as they may evolve. But I just wanted to point out that, particularly for the new members of the board, the precedent for a committee working directly with the staff and the designers on these issues.
Any more discussion? Jewel?
All right, we have a motion, a friendly amendment by Mr. Bonfils and a second by Mr. Allen. So we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Byers?
Jewel, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to make clear, once the friendly amendment is adopted or accepted by the maker of the motion, as I believe it has, then the motion that you're voting on is the motion, the main motion, which is to direct the staff to work with the Water Resources Committee on collaborating on the design of Reservoir Park. Thank you.
Thank you. And roll call vote, Mr. Byers?
Yes.
Mr. Bonfils?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Ms. Sursakar?
Yes.
Mr. Sultan?
Yes.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
And Mr. Koblis?
Yes.
Unanimous, sir. Thank you.
All right, well, let's move on to information items. The Jlma report. I'm not sure how much detail we need to get into this. A lot of us saw this already, but maybe just a broad stroke on this, whoever's talking. I think Kathleen is.
Hi, this is Darren, actually.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. Kathleen had to jump out early. I wasn't totally sure if I was presenting or not today, but I certainly can give a brief overview. As most of you know, the Joint Land Management Area back last year in 2019, the county changed a lot of the planning language, and so it wound up effectively increasing some of our service area. I guess I'll request control and see if this works. There we go, good. So I'll go through it kind of quickly here, but the Joint Land Management Area is that area between the town of Leesburg and our central service area. For years, this has been not kind of served by anyone directly, but Leesburg kind of had the first choice and they tended to serve this. So a lot of this area is actually already developed, and development is pending in many other areas. So two things really changed in this when they updated the comprehensive plan. One, they actually changed some of the existing rural policy area to transition policy area. That's this kind of Idaho-shaped blue box on the screen there. That, by becoming transition policy area, becomes a part of the Loudon Water Service District, or service area. So that is ours to serve kind of no matter what. That, if you can tell on the map, is just west of the Greenway and east of Evergreen Mills Road. And then in the Jlma area, back up if possible. In the Jlma, or Joint Land Management Area, they instead changed the text and made Loudon Water the presumed utility provider. So right away, Loudon Water jumped on this and kind of said, okay, what can we do to serve this? This is a large area of land that we had never originally planned to serve. So this is kind of another view of this area. You see in white here, the new transition policy area, and in yellow, the Joint Land Management Area. The Joint Land Management Area includes a lot of areas that are actually already developed. Basically, everything north of Route 7 is already residential and already served by the town of Leesburg. Any small parcels that are left in that area, we've just considered we can't serve. We're not going to run utilities through an area that already has existing utilities. But there's a large area in this Jlma area, or Joint Land Management Area, that is currently not served and has potential for service. This area is zoned to include potential data centers. There's also mining, there's quarries out there, residential, there's a huge park in the middle. There's a lot of different land uses out there. Let's see. So these are some of the areas that are not probably going to be served. The middle there is the Bowling Park. We're aware of at least 4 kind of large-scale major developments that are somewhere in the planning process. The dark blue there in the middle, most of you have heard about Microsoft. That continues to be kind of a fluid situation. It appears Leesburg might be serving all of that, although it's not really finalized. The blue area to the east is either the Tuscarora development or the Twin Creeks development. That's also close to our existing Goose Creek Industrial Park, where we are currently looking at options for changing how we serve that area. The existing wastewater plant there is on its last legs. And then on the far side where the transition policy area is, we're also starting to talk to some developers there who are looking for service. So right now we've kind of broken this up into the east and the west, with the park in the middle. It kind of makes sense for us to serve this in 2 portions. So we're preparing. As soon as this language came out, we jumped in. We kind of did a first step of giant master plan to say, can we serve this area? We completed that last winter. And then we looked more specifically just at the TPA or just the transition policy area, and we tried to say how would we serve that. And I'll present a little bit of those summary findings in just a moment. Right now, we're in the process of doing a more focused look at the east and the west separately, and especially the sewer services there, because of the way they will eventually integrate into the rest of our system. It makes it a bit more complicated. So the master plans essentially did a couple things. The first thing we did was say, how much demand is there out there? What's kind of the worst case scenario? If all this develops, if we have data centers that demand a lot of water, what might? Well, the maximum day water demand out there was about 9 million gallons per day, a significant volume. And when you take fire flows on top of that, that means we're going to have some relatively large pipes. On the wastewater side, was a similar situation. The average daily flow calculated at about 3 million gallons per day, which means a peak flow of about 10 million gallons per day. Those are some large numbers. That is assuming everything's completely built out and kind of at the worst case. But we wanted to start there and make sure, could we handle it? So, oops, too fast. So first thing we looked at was our treatment plants, and essentially we have capacity to serve even those high demand projections. We already have planned capacity expansions in the works. It may change our timing of exactly when those are needed or when they're required, but we have that capacity or that supply. Water storage was a little bit questionable depending on the exact phasing of the development plans, and they may need some additional storage tanks, but it's not necessarily required. That's going to really depend on how this all plays out. So we looked at kind of two sides of this. One, water. How would we serve water? We did an initial layout just to kind of see if there were any big obstacles. You can see kind of there's two large pipes that run, one more or less directly from Trap Rock, one from Belmont Ridge Road, that would serve this area, and it's relatively feasible to serve this area. Any alignments that you see here are simply a first cut along property lines or existing utility corridors to kind of say, what might it take? And then we could get some pricing and other things that we're going to use later. The sewer gets a little bit more complicated. We tried to see if we could serve it with just one pump station back into the rest of our system, but we'll probably need two. We designed these to make sure we can cover at least a 5-year storm, which is standard for wastewater planning. So we kind of have a western area pump station and then an eastern area pump station planned at this point. Again, this shows kind of serving the entire area because that's what we first had to look at. And you can see we actually went in to figure out what kind of pipe sizes we would need. Could we get the slope in the fall to get to one combined pump station? When we did that, the other thing we did was we actually, on the wastewater side especially, is look downstream because this is a lot of flow that's coming into the far side of our sewer system, which we didn't really plan on having large flows enter. Generally, as you get to the edge of our system, you get to the smallest diameter pipes. So we had to look and see, well, where could these pump stations discharge without overflowing or flooding our existing system? So from the west side, we had to almost bypass Trap Rock and go quite a ways into the system. From the east, it was similar. There's quite a bit of piping required, and this is going to definitely require some coordination, and this is why we are continuing to study the sewer side of this project, because we've got a couple of other existing pump stations and force mains that we can coordinate with, but it gets a bit trickier, and we need to do some more planning to make sure we get the best possible solution. We also then looked simply at serving the transition policy area by itself, and we also figured this is possible. The demands get a lot less. Water demands are about 1.6 million gallons per day. Still requires a large pipe in part because of fire flow. And then the sewer side, it's close to 1 million gallons per day of sewer that might generate. And again, then we move the pump station, but it's going to require a long force main coming to our plant. So we're still in the process of doing planning with this. We're still talking to a lot of people. Right now, we are in the process of scoping a couple of different projects. One, an area facility plan for the wastewater on the eastern part. We will coordinate that with our Goose Creek Industrial Park project, and also our Russell Branch sewer station, pump station that's in design. So we've got 2 facilities in design to coordinate this new facility with. And then on the west side, we're doing the same. We're continuing to talk to the development community all the time to try and get the best feel for what might be coming. We're trying to maintain open communications with the town and with the county in order to make sure we get the most feasible, efficient infrastructure that's out there. We're also looking a bit at fees and reimbursements, how that all might work out. Generally, our rule is development pays for everything that they need, but because of the size and the structure of this, I know there's going to be a little bit of trying to figure out how best to manage that and how we work with reimbursements to development. With that, I'd gladly take any questions. I kind of ran through it fast, but I think most of you have seen at least some of this before.
Thanks a lot, Darren. Oh, wait a minute, Brent's got his hand up. I'm sorry.
I thought I'd try to be polite this time. I haven't used that feature. Okay. Darren, question for you. Do we have any sense with the analysis what the tap fees, excuse me, would look like for something like that big Microsoft project? What kind of revenue would that be to LCSA?
I have not been too involved with the fees. I don't know if Carla or Brian or Hui or anybody else is on might help out with that one.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know off the top of my head because basically we would take their estimated water usage and apply the availability charge. I mean, I think that's something we could probably give you a range, but I don't know off the top of my head.
My guess is that it's a lot of money.
It always is for the data centers because of the amount of water they have to use. Yes.
That's right. And as Loudoun is working through the areas that can have data centers, there's not as many as we've had in the past. And as we've been tracking the fees, data centers have become a larger and larger part of our revenue. So I just wonder if we should be proactive in pursuing that business. I don't know what Microsoft is doing or thinking, but I feel like our organization and the town of Leesburg are really separate on this. And obviously, the town of Leesburg didn't like what the Board of Supervisors did with their policy changes. So I think we have to strike a difficult balance of being very collaborative with the town of Leesburg, but also recognizing that we represent our constituents, our board, our ratepayers, and so forth. And so that's business that I'd like to see us go after. So that's one comment. Another comment is, River Creek and Lansdowne, you all have been around, you'll remember this, they sued the town of Leesburg because they're in the unique position of not being able to vote in the town because they're outside the town limits, but they're on Leesburg water and sewer. And so they pay double the rates that the town pays, which are already high. So one question, and maybe it's Jonathan or Carla, I don't know, but are we prohibited? Help me understand the policy that the board changed, the Board of Supervisors. Are we prohibited from servicing Lansdowne and River Creek?
Yes. So the comprehensive plan language only addressed new development in the JLMA, and that's what Loudoun Water would be the presumed provider for new development only. So those areas already developed are not on our radar. To your first question or point, I think we have been having discussions with Microsoft, keeping in mind that we're doing that because the county has said you will serve the Jlma and you will serve this area P1, P2 that Darren was referring to. But as we've also told the town, because we don't want to get in the middle of any things going on between the county and the town, is that, you know, Loudon Water isn't out shopping for their customers either. We're only going to serve where the county tells us to serve. So while we've been trying to be proactive with Microsoft from a planning perspective, because that will help us with sizing pipes and things like that, at the end of the day, we have to remember too that part of the comp plan language change also allowed developers of new development to really have a choice. If they can't reach agreement with Loudon Water, or Loudon Water refuses to serve them, which again, we wouldn't do unless it was just not anywhere near our service facilities, that they can go to the town. And so there's that little nuance in there too, but we have been having discussions with Microsoft so that we can better plan for those areas.
Sure, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I mean, the board has told us, my understanding is by virtue of the Board of Supervisors action, they are instructing us to serve those areas that they designated. Because I agree with you, it's not our decision. We serve the Board of Supervisors and their directives, but their directive is serve this area. And so I don't understand why we wouldn't be proactive and solicit their business, especially if somebody has the choice, which they do. And so the town of Leesburg is going to say, you know, join our system, you know, we'd like your money. I don't understand why we wouldn't.
Mr. Kobelis, did you want to?
Yeah, I guess I agree with Brent. My big fear is that we spend a lot of money in infrastructure and then we don't get it. I mean, at what point do we have to start building in time for them to build? I mean, that's my big fear is like, okay, we were told we were to provide for those people. Now, and then they do have the choice, but it's still kind of directed towards us to provide first. Then my question is do we, you know, how far do we get along with infrastructure? I mean, we're talking some major stuff here in order to get it, especially on the sewage side.
Right. Well, I think that one of the misconceptions, I guess, is that Loudon Water just proactively puts the pipe in the ground, and that's typically not how it happens. Typically, the developer is putting in the pipe and the facilities that will serve their development. Now, in this particular area, we are open to discussions, which again is why we are being what we feel is proactive with Microsoft, because that kind of starts that ball rolling on the infrastructure itself. I don't want to leave you with the impression that we're not moving forward. We're doing everything we can do. Now we're doing area facility planning so that we hone in on pipe size and things like that. But typically your developers will be the ones to put in that infrastructure, and you want that commitment from them before you start spending money to do that. But again, this is sort of business as usual for us. We are talking to the developers in that area. We're talking to Microsoft, and we're continuing our planning for that. Mr. Allen.
Yes, thank you. Isn't Microsoft going to look at what the availability of the tap fee would be to hook into Leesburg, and then what the ongoing costs would be for water, and then do the same for us? And wouldn't we have a competitive advantage over them just from Microsoft's perspective on costs?
Well, I think what we find a lot of times with the data centers is that you know, you're going to have your capital side of their house, which cares about those tap fees and how much it costs to get the service to them. And then they go away and there's another group that cares about the operations piece. But yes, on the surface, we would definitely be less expensive. For most of them, it comes down to a matter of timing. And so because Leesburg service is right there, they can provide them service much more quickly than we can. We're not there yet, but from a financial standpoint, yes, you're right. Unless they're having to pay for that infrastructure to get there. So it's not just a simple tap fee, it's also getting the capital there to serve. So, and a lot of it is a timing perspective. Did that answer your question, Mr. Allen?
Yes, thank you, Carla.
Mr. Campbell has a question.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll piggyback on Terry. How much longer would we take providing water and sewer if, for instance, Microsoft said, yeah, we'd like to save a lot of money. We'll go with you, Loudon Water. How far are we behind the town of Leesburg in providing service to them if they wanted to proceed with their development?
I would say, and Darren, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I would think it's probably around a 2-year period, but I think there's phases within there where you could do some acceleration. But is that fair to say, Darren? Probably 18 months to 2 years, I think, is a fair, by the time you design and build.
Yes. I mean, the Microsoft is kind of in this general area. The difficulty would be building the pipe essentially from Trap Rock, crossing the creek, and getting up to their property. None of that is currently in place, and that's something typically we would ask them to build. Whereas the town of Leesburg has pipes kind of already next to their property. So timing-wise, this could probably get built, yeah, in roughly 2 years. Permitting and design would be a little tricky, but it's a proximity issue to some degree for Microsoft.
Okay. And you know, the property that they have, my understanding is that it's well over 300 acres. I mean, it's a very large piece of land, and so, you know, as they develop that, whenever they actually start, I mean, it's going to be a long horizon before that thing is built out. But I don't know. I look at us and I go, there's an inherent conflict between the board's instruction to Loudon Water and what the town of Leesburg would like to see happen. And you just, you know, I understand that you could say, well, we're kind of stuck in the middle here, but from my perspective, I feel like we need to choose sides a little bit, and we need to choose the side of the Board of Supervisors, which directed us to serve this area. And I understand that the town of Leesburg doesn't like that, and there's been disputes between the two, but we've been instructed to serve it, and I feel like it's a big opportunity for our organization. And I'd love to see the same effort that we went into selling butterfly roofs to selling tap fees to Microsoft.
Well, I do want to correct that a little bit in that our Robin Bailey, our business coordinator, is probably on the phone with Microsoft every week talking about their different phases. You're right, it's a huge property. They're going to have multiple phases. We know that. We've talked to them about that. And so again, we're absolutely following the Board of Supervisors' direction. We're not, whatever happens between the county and the town of Leesburg is between them. And we are coordinating with the county. And again, they tell us when and where, and we tell them how we're going to do it. And that's exactly what we're doing.
And that's great. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. If I could just chime in, this is Roddy. How are you all doing?
Hey.
I think that a very important thing that was added to the action taken by the Board of Supervisors that gets overlooked, and we talked about it, but it is a very important difference, is that in this case, they left an out for the developer to say that they have the choice. When we typically look at an area that we're going into and planning for development, there is no real choice in most cases, and you know, the developer works with us, and we provide them all of our information, and we work cooperatively and get it done. And we've been moving forward on this project. I mean, we took as soon as the word go came to us, we began the planning, and now we're even going further with the next level of getting things laid out. We're not taking our foot off the gas, and we are meeting regularly with Microsoft and all of the landowners and all of the folks who have approached us about potentially developing. I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that we are not doing everything we can to move forward. The real, you know, in all honesty, the real hurdle here has been that, you know, Microsoft has options, and they are really not, you know, aggressively pursuing this right now. That's not to say that in future phases they won't, but currently their focus is on getting their next phase, which they've made agreements, and everybody read about that. They've made agreements for the second phase of their development with the town of Leesburg to go that way. They did not approach us for that phase to seek service. And again, that was something that was allowed in the action taken by the Board of Supervisors. So, you know, I think I want to make sure that it's well understood that we are pursuing all opportunities, and we're not slowing down at all in any of this.
Well, thank you. And I see that Mark and Jonathan both have their hands raised, but I'll end by just saying I agree with Chairman Koblis's concern that we spend a bunch of time designing this thing, and then Microsoft says, you know, we're just going to go with the town of Leesburg, you know, or same with the other big project there, Tuscarora. You know, it'd be nice to get commitments or something from these people as we try to figure out what size pipes to design for and all that. So thank you, Rod. That was helpful.
Mr. Chairman, you want to go first?
Sure. If I remember correctly, the left-hand side of Greenway, we have to feed no matter what. Is that okay?
That's correct.
So then why aren't we going full bore ahead of starting the infrastructure to feed that, and the rest of, having Microsoft is just a bonus, but at least they'll see that we're starting with infrastructure to get to that point, and they'll benefit from that. And that way we would get them on board easier. Just a comment.
And I think that is one of the things we probably should have reiterated when Darren was presenting, which is we're headed in both of these directions anyway, right? You just hit it. What is to the west of the Greenway, we have to serve. That's now TPA, and we're moving forward with the area facility planning and moving on that. To the other side, we have the Goose Creek Industrial Park wastewater plant that needs to be taken care of. It's a very old facility. We need a solution there. And so we are already moving in that direction as well, with design of a pump station for that. So we're not waiting for anything per se. Again, we're talking to the stakeholders. I'm not even sure we're looking for commitment, because we know that we have to do this. It would be nice to have it, but yeah, we're going in there. So we're headed in both directions anyway. Jonathan?
Yeah, thanks, Carla. The other uncertainty that I think we have to be aware of, and we didn't discuss in the presentation, is that the town of Leesburg did file a lawsuit challenging the change to the service area. And although we are not privy to it, there is information out there that there are negotiations occurring between the town and the county. And one possible outcome of that lawsuit and those negotiations, or if it proceeds to court, is that the decision on the service area gets changed. And we have to be cognizant and frankly careful that we don't expend a lot of money and time and resources extending service into the area only to have that decision reversed. And I think that's important to be aware of. And I would also just reiterate, you know, Carla's had lots of conversations with senior county administration, and the message that we always, that Carla has given and we've been supporting is to the Board of Supervisors, tell us what you want us to do and we'll do it. There has never been a conversation when those words, I think, haven't been said. So I just want to reassure you that there is, I believe that if you ask the county administration, they would say, yes, Loudon Water is doing everything that we've asked them to do.
Jonathan, this is Angeline. Thank you very much for providing that piece of information. It's very, very helpful. Yes, it is very, very helpful. I was a little aware of that in the past, but thank you for going in detail and providing that information. I don't think so it will influence our decision, not influence my decision, but of course, this is one of the reasons I'm on the board, because I like to, you know, attain informed decisions, and to make that, we need to be able to get the detail and the information we need. So thank you for that.
Mr. Allen has a question.
So this is for Jonathan. Just to be clear, the lawsuit would not affect P1 and P2, those zones, right?
That's my understanding. Carla's probably more familiar with that than I am, but that's my understanding.
So back to Brett's point, or I don't know if it was Mark Kobolis's point, if since that was part of the comprehensive plan, since we have to get services in P1 and P2, maybe we could be running a line there, and even if the JMLA is overturned, we still haven't wasted any money because we have to go to P1 and P2 anyway.
That's correct. I mean, and I guess I'm not being clear that that's what we're doing. We're actually going in both directions, regardless of what happens with the JLMA piece. We're going to take care of, on the east side, we're going to be at least having a pump station in there to serve that Goose Creek Industrial Park. And if we're still in there serving the JLMA, nothing changes, we're going to be set there, at least from a pump station perspective. On the west side, absolutely serving P1, P2 that came in from the rural policy area, now TPA. So, and we're moving forward with the planning for that as well, area facility planning with that.
So let me ask you this as well. So if we're running a line to P1 and P2, and if Microsoft then called up in a year and said, hey, we want service, would we have to run a parallel line to the one that's going to P1 and P2? Or could we tail off of that line and just go across to Microsoft?
I'm going to have to defer to Roddy and Darren on that, but I think it serves both purposes. Isn't that correct, Roddy?
Well, in a way, and Darren's got a slide up here right now that is a little helpful. This was the option that Darren spoke of, where we would be serving just the TPA, P1 and P2, not the JLMA. If Microsoft and other developers within the JLMA decided they did not want our service, it would be probably more efficient in the water side of things to just run on the opposite side of the greenway, and as he shows here in this, and then go up and serve those areas. That still wouldn't preclude an extension across the greenway up on the north end of that to bring it over to serve other properties if that were the desire. But the sooner we know, and we kind of were having these conversations with Microsoft, if we know from them that they are looking for service from us, it would make more sense to route the water line through their property, cross the greenway in a couple of spots, and or maybe just one, and then and serve the area that way. So those are the kinds of conversations we're having with Microsoft to let them understand that by being a cooperative developer in this, that I think the best solution could be achieved, which would be a kind of a combination of serving the JLMA area and P1, P2 together would be probably the best way ultimately to serve all of that. And regardless, something else to maybe mention is that the other thing we keep in mind is that it's unclear to us right now whether the town of Leesburg has the capacity to serve all of the needs of Microsoft. And regardless of whether we serve them directly or if at some point the town were to come to us seeking a wholesale agreement for capacity, we would still need to have the capacity in the system, and we do have the capacity in the system to serve those properties either way. So those things are all in the mix of things that we are considering all along the way.
Mr.
Just-
Koblis has a question.
Yeah, just a quick comment on this design right here. We're showing that the pipe's going to cross the greenway right next to the water treatment plant. If I remember correctly, the people that just tried to do that, had a horrendous problem getting through there and also destroyed the greenway going through there. So we may want to relook at this piece of pipe here.
Absolutely, this is a schematic. We would find a good point of crossing where there was some fill, hopefully, in place.
Exactly.
All right, it's getting to be 6 o'clock already. Now we're getting into Sean Kelly length of meetings. Nah, I'm just kidding.
Congratulations.
Is there any other comments? All right, let's move forward. Are there any questions on the mid-year budget results? Not that I don't want to hear Brian talk, but are there any questions on that? I think the Finance Committee went in detail through it. Anybody from the CIP committee that would have some questions on that budget? Okay, the finance summary monthly report. Any questions on that report from Brian? From what I observed on the water resources management report, everything looked fine. So I don't know if anybody has any questions on that.
Yeah, I have one question. Why is Goose Creek Reservoir yellow?
Oh, it's.
So Alton is had to leave the meeting earlier today, but the real quick and dirty on that is that that was the July report, and the level in Goose Creek had been dropping into the lower level of the zone. Obviously, August came along and cleaned that up, and we're now above normal flow in Goose Creek. So you'll notice that changed on the August report. So there are two monthly reports included in the package, and one was July and one was August.
Thanks.
Water and sewer agreements. Not sure we have any questions there usually. The BOA quarterly report, is there any questions on that? And normally on the capital construction report, I love seeing that, but is there anybody that has any questions on that or would like to see his report? All of us on the CIP committee saw it and everything seems to be moving along fine. Land development, any questions on that? Operation and maintenance, Roddy, we have there was a fault on one project. I remember Patty Saris used to just go crazy when there was a penalty on this thing. Can you explain that one for me? I don't have it offhand.
Right. Am I still on? Yeah. So that was at Waterford, and unfortunately there was a sampling error on one particular sample for the BOD there, and there was some material that got into and contaminated the sample. And unfortunately it caused a ding on our record there.
So there was nothing really wrong. It was just something our sample was wrong.
It was a sample collection error in that case.
Okay. Any questions on that? As always, the safety results are fantastic. I assume there isn't a closed meeting, and if somebody could make a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I think everybody made that motion at one time.
I'm sorry, I didn't get it.
Just pick one.
You didn't get it done by 6, though.
Oh. All right. Second.
I'll second that, Angeline.
Okay.
Okay.
Roll call.
Roll call, Mr. Byers,
Yes.
Bonfield,
Aye.
Mr. Gamble,
Aye.
Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Moody,
Yes.
Sir Sakar,
Yes.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mr. Sultan,
Yes.
and Mr. Koblis.
Yes, and thank you, everybody, and please be safe and healthy.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.